Griesmer, Stonegate Capital. And we are your guest hosts today while Scott's off on vacation.
Good morning, everyone.
Today we're going to be talking about the note from hell with Bill. And also we're going to be talking about other things that new note investors and note business people should be looking out for. Bill, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, that was one thing when we were talking about putting this together today. Some advice for people just starting out. Gail and I have been having some success in this, but things do not always go perfect. There was one note that I bought actually a couple years ago that just earlier this year I finally got resolved. This note was a performing note when I bought it. And then the borrowers never made a single payment after I had bought it. They had made the payment the month before and had been paying pretty consistently, but I don't know if they figured it would just get lost in the paperwork or what have you, but they never made a single payment. So at the same time, then the servicer that it was with, that servicer, Pika, they decided to leave the servicing business. So the transfer got very complicated. And like I said, right along the way, then the borrower stopped paying. So I eventually had to involve an attorney, and the borrowers did agree to leave and took the house back. And the house was really just a wreck. This week, boy, we could do a whole episode on this. Just learned the house was in such poor condition. So I tried to just sell it via realtor right away. Didn't have a furnace, didn't have a hot water heater, multiple holes in the house. So eventually hired a contractor, and the contractor did not work out really well either. He started off doing some good work, but then he decided to walk away from the project, and I eventually fired him shortly thereafter.
Well, tell us that there was a good news ending on all of this after you went through all that.
That's exactly correct. I was just going to get to that. So with the input of some other veteran note investors, actually, I did end up selling the house via seller financing, and I made my own note out of it. And it was really just a win-win situation all along. I was able to sell it to a young family, and they had some skills and some tools to perform repairs to the house. And then they were able to buy the house with principal, interest, tax and insurance, the whole shebang for about $150 less than it would to comparatively rent the house. While I was doing that, I also talked with FNAC about how to design the note in order to maximize its the worth. Terms are very variable when you're putting together and designing something like that. So the overall impression is don't expect everything to be perfect with regards to either the notes business or with an individual note. The perfection really does not exist.
Well, you were able to make a profit eventually on this, or did you break even? Were you hurt pretty badly on this one, or no?
No, I will eventually make money on this. And so really in just a couple of years, if I decide to sell the note, I could even cash out and break even or even make some money on it. And that's after a lot of things really went wrong.
And that's a good point with the note business. And people don't often think about that, is that you always have to have an exit strategy, and you always have to try to be one up on everything. And it sounded like you were ready and you were in place. And the beautiful thing about the business is that we do have this cadre of a network that helps out and is there for us. So it's gone better for you since then too. I know you're really making your name for yourself in the note business.
Yeah. And what Gail, that's exactly correct. That's one thing about the notes business is it's like Scott likes to put it, there's a lot of co-opetition. Some of the very successful people that are already doing this business, such as Scott, but even lots of others like Wayne Snell and Dan Zatofsky and Cody Cox and Dave Putz. These people legitimately want you to succeed. You'll find people very willing to, answer a couple questions for them. They don't lock themselves away and, they're just trying to figure out ways to put one over on you.
Well, that's true. There is a lot of business. There's trillions and trillions of dollars worth of non-performing debt out there. And what we're doing is we're taking and we've made a business model in finding these and then going ahead and improving them, allowing people to stay in their homes in most cases and moving on. But it's good that you had a backup plan in that particular case with your note. And when we buy notes, people don't realize we have to think of all these contingencies that can happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree 100%.
So what kind of advice would you give to someone, because we're talking about people investing in notes for the first time and we're talking about people coming into the note business for the first time.
Yep.
What do you think, looking back, and when you first started a long time ago, what do you think about, what advice could you pass on?
Well, the first thing is you always hear this, but you really want to try to think about where you're at in your circumstances and really what you want to accomplish. And that helps you really set your goals. And really setting your goals in that, one of the common themes I heard this weekend at another conference, the Magnify Your Wealth conference, I'll talk a little bit more about that, is really kind of starting with the end in mind, the old Stephen Covey saying. Mm-hmm. And I come back to that just because that will help you make decisions and really help you kind of frame or design your plan. For example, if you really like landlording, you can use notes in order to just acquire more houses. And that's going to really affect the types of notes that you look at. If you have someone that hasn't made a payment in 2 years, there's a very good chance you'll end up foreclosing and you could end up taking that house back. So again, if that's your plan to try to rent these out, then that would be the type of note you would want to pursue. Right. By contrast, if you were after trying to get people to reinstate, that's much closer to what I'm trying to accomplish. You're generally going to try to shy away from houses or from notes that don't have a at least somewhat recent pay history. You're trying to get a note that has at least 1 or 2 payments within the last year. You're generally going to have more success trying to either reinstate the mortgage or trying to modify the mortgage or something under those circumstances. After somebody that, let's face it, for several years, if you're, if you haven't paid a thing for 4 years and then someone says, you got to start paying on this again, there's that doesn't always work out really well. So, that's one thing off the top of my head. Really just set your goals and think about what it is exactly that you want to accomplish.
Okay, jumping back for a minute, if I can, Bill, what would you, we have a question from our audience, Scott Carson. What could you have done different with the note from hell?
A couple things. A lot of them Scott has talked about. On that note, I didn't know any better at the time. I've since learned a lot. It is so vitally crucial to have someone out to see the property. Most likely and most preferably by far having a local realtor out to look at it. If I had done that, I probably never would have bought that. Another thing that, we learn and through Scott and We Close Notes is the importance of checking utilities. If I had done that, I would have learned that they did not have water utility hooked up and they did not have power hooked up.
And they were living in the property without water and power? That
is correct. As it turned out, they were stealing water from the next door neighbor. They had it jury rigged. They had the water meter laying in the corner of the basement, and they were getting by without power and heat. It really amazed me. I mean, they had young children living in that home as well, and with a broken window. And this is in Ohio. It can be a cold climate up here. It's not exactly, Game of Thrones, winter is coming all the time, but it is, especially in the winter, it can get cold. So,
yeah, I can imagine.
So really, with those two things in mind, those were two big things that I've learned better that I will have corrected since then. And, that is now part of my extended due diligence on every single note and property that I look at.
And that is an excellent point too. And you talk about the due diligence process because, as we learned from Scott, you can do too much due diligence and then just be paralyzed with fear and moving forward. And sometimes when you're starting something new, it's that jumping off point and starting. So doing the due diligence in the front end is always very vital. But you can always, and people don't realize this, put the note under a contract and then go back and do it. And then if something happens, you can fade or bring your bid down a little bit, or you can go ahead and just pull it out completely. But that's the big thing, is just starting off and doing that first one. And then the second one, if you think back, well, you were young, you don't remember when you were trying to walk and you always fell. And there's a reason you don't fall face first, besides center of gravity, but you don't fall face first, and you're not going to fall face first in the note business because you're not going to die.
Yeah.
In training.
And right along those lines, Gail, you don't have to know everything to get started. You just have to know where to go for help. Like I mentioned previously, there's a lot of senior note investors that can help you with things. WCN, we have a very active Facebook group. Every day there's 5 to 6 posts, and you'd be amazed at the quality of feedback that you can get on there.
Yep.
And it's today it's easier than ever with social media. And, if I can help people that are listening, by all means, feel free to do that. I was just talking with some newer note investors, Clifton and Rob, this weekend at the conference. And I told them, feel free to call me, contact me, email, phone call, text, smoke signals if you want. Right. It'll all work. Feel free to contact someone for help. There are places to go for help. There
is. And to coin another famous phrase, done is better than perfect.
That is exactly correct.
You got to do it. And you and I were talking earlier about that, because a lot of folks say, well, why does everybody help each other? And it's because, like, you and I are not looking in the same markets. You and I do not have the same parameters that we're trying to find these specific notes. We're not doing these. We're not bidding against each other because there's so much business out there. You may be having a note source. I may have another note source, so we're not impeding on each other, but it's a collaborative agreement. And in fact, I may have a note that you want, and you may have a note that I want, and there's exchanges that go on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very tight-knit group, I think, that we have become a part of, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly it, Gail. Just what we mentioned earlier. There's so different people have different goals and different circumstances. And for example, when I was talking with Dave Putz earlier this year, he lives in New Jersey, and he even mentioned, I live in New Jersey. This was Dave saying, and so I will occasionally buy in New Jersey, even though a lot of people don't really want to buy in that state or invest in that state, sometimes because there's long foreclosure timeframes. But, if that's your home state, you kind of have a little bit of an advantage and probably an increased tolerance for something like that. If worse comes to worse, something comes up, I can always drive out to that asset and kind of get an idea what's going on myself, much easier than if Dave was living in New Jersey and had bought in, Idaho, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone buying a note in Idaho, but I'm sure it exists there.
Yeah, there probably is. And it's a wonderful thing, too, is the fact that this is a very portable and transportable business. We can be anywhere looking at notes. We tend to think, I'm a former rehabber, so we tended to try to stay in a geographic area. And one of the things that is very specific to the note business is you're not stuck into one geographic area. And I like my home state of Florida because I know it and I'm familiar with it, especially if I have to take an unfortunate circumstance where I have to take the note back and take the property back. Then I have the advantage of being able to drive to it or whatever. But I haven't limited myself to the state of Florida, just as you haven't limited yourself to the home state.
Exactly.
Because everything's on internet now. I mean, everything is done virtual. And we do these deals and people think about it. And I was talking to someone earlier this morning about that. She's a fellow realtor and she's like, well, how in the world can you go buy something in Ohio or Indiana or Tennessee? I said, because the numbers work. And I can get people to go and look at it for me. And I can go get a broker's price opinion, also known as a BPO in this business. Or Pro Title can do the title search. You know, you don't go into it blindly, but you do have this vast array of geography that we can invest in.
Yep, that's exactly correct. There are differences across the country, but math is pretty consistent. 2 + 2 is 4, whether here in Ohio or Florida or California or even out in outer space.
Well, you get into a different set of numbers when you start doing space, but that's a different story for a different day. I put something on there the other day on one of my blogs. I said I went from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour. And then I realized people probably don't know what the heck I'm talking about. But that's the speed that you have to go to achieve orbit and stay in orbit.
I knew that.
I know you would. Some of the hey, you know.
That's why we get along, Gail. We're both kind of space junkies at heart.
Yeah, well, let's preface it because I want people to don't think I'm a space cadet or anything. I did work for NASA for 26 years and retired and got into the note business. So I launched a career in a different direction and it's worked out real well for me. And a lot of it is analysis when you get into the note business. And I was good at it. You know?
Well, and that kind of ties into another thing for new note investors to try to really keep in mind. I encourage everyone to really be willing to expand your horizons and really try new things. Mm-hmm. That is really the only way to grow in whether it's note investing or anything. I guess you can take that and run with that even in terms of your life.
Right.
I went to San Diego this past weekend.
Tell us about that. Tell us about Magnify Your Wealth.
Yep, I went to the Magnify Your Wealth conference. It was put on by Laughlin and Associates, and I was really on the fence about going even a couple weeks ago. It was, it's I'm about as Midwest as they come. And the farthest west I had ever been was Colorado. And boy, San Diego, that's all the way out there. And California, they just do things a little different out there, but in a really good way. You know, it was San Diego's just a beautiful city. Mm-hmm. Did a lot of new things. I learned a lot really just about running a business as compared to note investing. They really are two different things. And if you're just starting out there, you really want to kind of have an oar in both of those rivers, so to speak. They're both really part of your success. So just, try new things, talk to new people. That's a big thing. It would have been a big waste of time and money for me to go out there and just, kind of sit in a corner. Okay, well, I'm Bill. I'm from Ohio, but I'm not going to tell anybody, kind of go in top secret Operation Covert. It might work in movies, but at least if you're trying to do business and note investing, it's not going to work really well for you. I was out there.
Right with that, because your sphere of influence, when I talk to, people starting in the real estate business or rehabbing or even notes now, people say, well, I don't know anybody. Well, yeah, you do. You have a lot of people that you don't think about. Like, for example, I started talking to my doctor, my dentist, my chiropractor about what are they doing with this, the money, you have neighbors, you have friends, you have people that want to learn about the note business. You want to have people that want to invest in the note business. I don't know anybody in this world that only knows one person in themselves, and the other point you make, and it's very important to us, is once we learn about the note business, you continue to learn about the note business and you continue to network and educate yourself and you invest in your education. So there's a lot going on with that too. And you're right, you have to network and you have to do these seminars and conferences.
Yeah, exactly correct. Business and personal development even, every single person, including me, I'm sure including you and even Scott, every single person in this life has things that they can work on, things that they can improve on. And if you're not paying attention to things like that, it can hinder you. So always be learning, always be looking to improve. That's a big thing I think everybody can learn from and really take into account in their own life. Just continual improvement, continuous learning, continue to read business books. Just the other day, I picked up this book called Rewire. It's all about improving your habits. And then one phrase in there that really stood out to me, so many people want to go into note investing and they want to end up leaving their job.
Right.
And the only way you're going to accomplish that is to really establish good routines and systems and habits. And you want to be a slave to those habits. And then the ironic thing is, if you become a slave to those habits, you might then have a better chance to leave your job. And so that gives you freedom.
It does. And you're absolutely right about that, because one of the things I still struggle with is the vast amount of social media types and how to get your word out there and your message out there. And it's ever changing and it's a constant thing. We learned about that in the Note Camp also, where I outsourced mine. I have to admit, I got JD with Note Pros doing my social media and my marketing, because it's a constant thing. And once you get your systems and processes down, then you can go after and you can do the big work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exciting. I'm hoping that somebody comes up with some questions for us, because I don't see anything yet. I noticed we got some of our buds on there listening. At least they could heckle us. I know Eric Hyde's probably listening right now, because he sent me a text message and said he was going to heckle me, and I had to bring it on.
But Gail, we talked about this in Cape Coral. There is nothing wrong with using a pro like JD to outsource some of your social media. There is nothing wrong with that whatsoever. JD does a good job. I'm also a customer of his. I use Note Pros. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, it actually works out better. No one in this entire world, I think, is an expert at everything. Okay. Right. That's all there is to it. Lance Armstrong could teach Bill Gates a thing or two about riding a bike, and vice versa. I'm pretty sure Bill Gates could, teach Lance something about computers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we learn from each other and we share our experiences and everything. It's sort of like this, we've had an opportunity. I wouldn't have imagined ever doing a web cast. If somebody had told me this, a couple months ago, I would have, but no, are you kidding me? Are you serious? But it's been great. Yeah, it's great. And we step outside our comfort zone. I know you're going to live on for infamy too. I'm going to watch this and say, oh, I should have said this and done that. And you're always going to do that. But, we've come up with 30 minutes and I don't see any questions that are coming across for us, but do you have any closing thoughts on today?
Yeah, I've got a couple other thoughts that we can go over with folks, and I'm sure you'll agree with this also, Gail, is the importance of taking action. Yes. Scott talks about this all the time, but again, for those new investors out there, the tendency, and I see this in so many people, including myself at times, that, if I just read one more book, or if I read one more article, or if I watch Note Camp for the, fourth time, and don't get me wrong, there's a wealth of information there.
Yes.
But you can read all the coursework, all the education material you'd like, but nothing beats experience. Like I told you, I had a trouble transferring a note once upon a time with a servicer. Until you actually go through that process and you're talking to Ashante Duffy with Madison or what have you, until you actually go through the process and you see the goodbye letter going out and then the hello letter going out, and you start talking with them. Okay, so tell me kind of where we are with this note, what's going on with it. Until you actually go through that process, it's just the great unknown.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Now, we're going to wrap up. But if anybody wants to contact you or me, I'll go ahead and let you go first. If someone wants to reach out to us and talk more about notes in the business or any investments opportunities, how can people reach you, Bill?
Sure. I'd be happy to give people that information. My email is wjgriesmer@gmail.com. Or my cell phone is 614-284-0071. Hopefully we can do that. I know Scott does that sometimes. So
yeah. And what's the name of your company?
My company is Stonegate Capital, and I'm also a monthly columnist. I have a monthly column about note investing in Think Realty magazine. And then I'll also be on a radio show with Vina Jones-Cox here later this summer, and I'll be speaking at a Ohio Notes conference we're having here near Cincinnati, Ohio. Both Scott and I will be speaking at that conference.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm Gail the Note Gal, Gail Villanueva. My company is Noteworthy Investments. You can find me at www.gailthenotegal.com to make it easy. And my phone number here in Central Florida is 321-417-1142. Well, it's been fun today.
If I could add also my website. See, that's another thing I just learned. My website is stonegatecap.net. Stonegatecap.net. See, that's another little tidbit I just learned.
There you go. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Scott Carson, we really appreciate the opportunity to have done the podcast today, webcast rather, in your absence. I hope you and Stephanie have a great time away from the office, getting some well-needed rest.
That's right. And for all the audience, we're going to try going forward to have some fun with this and have a little Where's Scott and Steph, experience. Try to get them sending in some pictures as they're out there at these great historical sites out there in Europe. So we'll try to have a little fun with it along those lines also. And both Gail and I will be on other times in the next couple of weeks here.
Absolutely. All righty. Well, thank you very much. And it was good chatting with you and the world today.
All right. Thank you both, Gail, and also Scott.
All right.
Have a good day, everybody.
You too. Thanks. Bye.